Okay, thanks for coming back. I'm very pleased to introduce Yaakov Elon, who's the chief anchorman of Walla News, one of the leading, or uh, the leading digital outlet in Israel, and he will introduce the panelists. Please, Yaakov.
Thank you very much, Uri. Welcome, everybody, and good night. We're competing against dinner, so we'll try to do this as effectively as possible. Hi,
Microphone.
Welcome, and good evening. Oh, I need to turn it on. One, two. One. Okay, now?
No, probably you should sit a bit closer. Closer to the mic, no?
Okay, now?
Hey, hey.
We're okay now? There we go. Again, thank you and good evening. As I said, we were competing against dinner, so we'll try to do this as effectively as possible. It's fun times for the press and journalism, and the title of our discussion this evening is Governments and the Press, Friends or Foes? And we have four wonderful people here to discuss this, and I'll ask each and every one of them to introduce themselves briefly. Lynn, we'll start with you.
Thank you. My name is Lynn Walsh. I am the national president for the Society of Professional Journalists. We are one of the largest organizations representing journalists and the fight for free press in the United States. Professionally, I work for NBC in San Diego, California.
Hello, my name is Aviv Bushinsky. I was born in Israel. I spent all my 10 years in life here in Israel as a second generation. My father is an American correspondent. He was he's a veteran now, but he was one of the founders of CNN and was working for Group W, for Chicago Sun-Times and other media in the States, in Canada and Australia. My dream was to be just like my father. I never managed to become like my father, but I ended up as a journalist for the Israeli Broadcast Authority, Kol Israel radio. Then I moved on to the IDF radio, Galei Tzahal, as a diplomatic correspondent. And then I got the phone call that my father didn't like, to move to and become the media advisor for the Prime Minister. I couldn't resist. I resist my father. And I was Netanyahu's media advisor for several years. Then in his term as finance minister, I became his chief of staff, and I retired from all those games in 2004. Since then, I'm in business and lecturing and writing from time to time.
And therapy, I think, also.
Rehabilitation.
I think it works. Yeah?
Okay,
Oh, no.
go for it.
Yeah, that's better. So my name is Galina Sidorova. I'm from Moscow, and I welcome you all from the cold. I have been in journalism for many years. I started as a correspondent, special correspondent, diplomatic correspondent, and finally correspondent in conflict zones with Novое Время, New Times magazine in Moscow in the 80s. And for 10 years, as of the year 2000, I was editor-in-chief of the monthly, Совершенно секретно monthly. It's a privately owned newspaper specializing in investigative reporting. I quit in 2010. We organized with my colleagues community of investigative journalists, Fund 1929, because of the political pressure and impossibility to continue our work as we wanted to continue it inside the magazine. And it was a short time in my career that in the beginning of the 90s, where I was closely connected with the then Russian government of Boris Yeltsin. I was invited to be a political advisor to the first Russian foreign minister, Mr. Kozyrev. So that was a short time when I was not a journalist, but I was in my soul, I was still journalist, and that was the reason why I quit the ministry in mid-90s and get back home, as I put it to myself. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm the cuckoo in the nest because I'm not a journalist. I'm Zoltán Kovács, I'm the government spokesman for Hungary. I've been doing this since 2014, but I'm in communications since 2010, when I was basically setting up the communication structure of the government at that time. And apart from a year and a half, which I've spent in a different field, I've been doing government communications, especially and with an emphasis on external foreign communications.
Thank you. So we have the United States, Israel, Russia, and Hungarian. Thank you very much. Now, Lynn, let's start with you, because I don't want to say latest victim, but latest target of the press is the United States. How have we become to the point where all news is called fake news now?
Well, what we're seeing, and I think one of the main reasons why I was invited here is because President Trump was elected as president in the United States. And I think he really kind of coined the term and is using the term in a way that has brought it to the forefront. I will say his using of the term is something that is unprecedented in the United States, in a democracy that prides itself on freedoms, on allowing their citizens the access to government officials, allowing them to speak freely, and allowing news agencies to ask those questions. So I think the important thing to point out about fake news, though, is that in the way that Donald Trump and that President Trump uses the term fake news is not really how it is meant to be used. He uses fake news to describe news articles he does not like, whether because they make him look bad, he doesn't like the picture they use, whatever that might be. Fake news, when you look at what it really is, and it's not new, it's been around for a while, this is not a new phenomenon. Fake news is when someone takes a story, makes it look like it is a real news story, whether they create a great website, they make it a good headline, they take a URL that's CNN.us dot something. It's a fake URL, and they make it look like it's real news. The point,
but the thing is that it works for him. It works for him because something in the mind of American people probably say there's something to it. And why is that?
Well, I think because traditionally when the president has spoken, it has been taken very seriously in the United States. The president speaks, it breaks into, no matter what's on TV, they will break into primetime coverage. So because he is the president, because it is this powerful position, when the president has traditionally throughout time spoken, it is taken as fact, it's respected, it's understood, you kind of stop and you pay attention. So I think that is part of it. There are still people that when the president speaks, they are taking it as fact. I think also, though, he's speaking to a part of the country that does feel disenfranchised in that they believe it too. They believe those articles that are not true, or they believe that the media is the elitist. They believe that we are liberal.
Maybe the media earned this, in a way?
I think to some extent there is absolutely truth to the fact that specifically in the United States media, in America, we have lost touch in some cases, especially when you look at the major news outlets. Not so much local news, I wouldn't say, but when you look at the major news outlets and the people that have the loudest voices, CNN, 24-hour news stations, I do think they have lost touch with middle America, with a majority of the populations. It's very centered on East Coast, West Coast. And that's a problem. And I think in this election, you've seen news agencies, and I've talked to news agencies that are changing their plans to make sure that doesn't happen again. So I do think, yes, part of that is on us, that the public is buying into these claims of fake news and some of the things that President Trump specifically is forcing out there.
Galina, in Russia, we're talking governments and press, friends or foes. In Russia, friends or else?
Well, probably I'm not the right person to ask this question. To me, everything
You're
is
the best
clear.
we have here.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. But, well, to me, it's clear. My position is that there's no question in it, because press and governments are should never be friends. Because the press, media has to ask tough questions to to our governors, to the governments, to our leaders. That is our mission. That's why we exist. So it's really a little bit strange when we put it this way. On the other hand, what we have in reality in Russia now, and I have to recognize it, that mainstream media is let's put it friends with the government. The other way to put it is that mainstream media is dependent on the government, and even I would say feels not bad being taken by the government, taken this way, because most of news that somewhere would probably be called fake news, I would call, if we take Russia, I would call propaganda. That's what, unfortunately, most of the TV channels either owned by the government or owned by oligarchs or business people who are really dependent on Putin regime, dependent on his on Kremlin. So they do what they are said to do, or sometimes they even don't have to be told what to say, because they know what they expect from them.
Where is the voice that says enough?
Unfortunately, it's very like
Whispering.
wow, whispering. But still, well, I also would like to say that there are still independent media, not so outspoken, not so just. We don't have opportunity to speak, for instance, on TV, and as you know, it's the main the main media, the main means that is reaching the huge auditorium, huge audience. On the other hand, we have, of course, possibilities to do it through internet, but unfortunately now even internet is being under control, or the control is imposed. The legislation, the new legislation that has been passed in Russian Parliament in recent years is aimed at controlling the internet. And by the way, I would like to give you one figure. Many journalists and bloggers who are contributing their stories in the internet, they are now sentenced on this extremist and terrorist terms. Really? Because for posting stories and blogs which are called which having some extremist things in this, according to the new legislation, and even those who do not post their stories but who repost the stories are being sentenced. We have 300 sentences in 2016 of the people who reposted the stories which are considered by the new law to have some kind of extremist content in it.
So Lynn, you see there's still room to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we'll elaborate on this later. Aviv here, I want to ask you, as a former journalist and a former spokesman for the government, for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, you've seen both sides. I don't know, I suspect neither gives you pleasure. Am I correct?
No, the journalism aspect does give me pleasure.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think they're doing a marvelous job.
You did such a good job as a spokesman. What was wrong with that?
I wish. But I think that there's a new it's not a relatively new phenomena which adds to what Lynn mentioned, that nowadays the government, once they are being criticized so harshly and so frequently by the media, the way to bounce back, the way to push back, is to claim that the media conveys fake news, even though if it's not fake. And this is a way how you convince the people in Israel that something is wrong and that the media deliberately chases the government. And unfortunately, most people do believe that it's true.
Why is that? Why does that work so well?
I don't know, but I'll give you a story. I saw Ilana in the break between the sessions and reminded me a story that once I finished my role as a diplomatic reporter for Galei Tzahal, once I moved into this position, the guy who showed me the way was Udi Segal. Udi Segal is one of the most prominent journalists in Israel. He's working now for Channel 2 as a diplomatic correspondent. And we went together. I am as a relatively newcomer as a reporter, about to replace him. And we went in the corridors of the government where Netanyahu was sitting. And we went from room to room, and he pinpointed and he said, and I'm telling it because he said the story recently with a big audience, so I'm allowed to say it. I said, look at this guy, don't believe him. You see this guy, he's a liar. You see this guy, he's a jerk, etc., etc. All the people that were sitting in the government. So one, there's a huge disbelief between the journalist and the guy, or and the people who are working for the prime minister, because they are maybe manipulators, maybe they are liars, maybe they were told to lie or whatever. So I think that there is no cure to this phenomena, but what I fear are two things. One, that the government learned that by attacking the media, it serves, it delivers. And the other thing is that the media, in a way, at least maybe according to the polls, is losing in this battle because nowadays the leaders found their way to penetrate into the mass public by Twitters, by Facebook, etc., etc. When I just started working for Netanyahu and we had the rallies trying to be re-elected, and we went to one square to the other, he said at one point, said, you know what, it's a waste of time. I don't want to do it anymore. And he had few bad incidents with public and stuff, the mistakes that were done. And he said, I want to go only to TV. This is the way you can go live, bypass the journalist, and speak directly to the people. I think, and you can tell, that Netanyahu nowadays prefer not to give any interviews. He tweets, he uses
what used
Facebook,
to be TV
and it pays.
candidate is now Facebook candidate.
Right.
Right. Zoltan, what do you think about us journalists whining here?
Well, we haven't clarified the rules here, so it's, if it's about Chatham House rules, I would conduct a different, conversation than it's not. I presume it's not, and I presume that what I'm going to say or tell is going to be written about. So thank you. That's good. That's a good preparation period. But it was really interesting to listen to Mr. Bernstein, because that was a very meaningful kind of introduction, summary, whatever you call it, from his perspective, especially about truth, facts, the best obtainable version of the truth in general. And I wanted to remind you to one of our founding fathers in Hungary of modern democracy, Ferenc Deák, who would be something like John Adams or Thomas Jefferson, who put it very simple, actually, about when it was about establishing the fundamental rules for journalism and how to write about politics. And that was very short, would answer the request earlier here that what would be the soundbite for that longer version. Don't lie. And I think it's just a very, I would say, very brief summary of how the expectation on behalf of a government spokesman, and I got to tell you that I'm a former academic. I used to teach about the history of the media, of public opinion in an international environment. So that's a nice and brief summary of how you would expect the new journalism and journalists to work and do their job.
So
now that's increasingly
your advice to
difficult.
governments is don't lie.
Now, my advice, I mean, it's Ferenc Deak's advice to basically politics and politicians, including journalists who are writing about politics, that don't lie. Now, it's increasingly difficult, obviously, to determine how it's, what is a lie. We've learned interesting new approaches, alternative facts and stuff like that, how reality and truth can be approached. But very honestly, I myself and the government back in Hungary, in Budapest, we've been through many of this. I mean, Hungary bashing for the past 7 years for many reasons was very popular, especially with Western European and American journalists. And very honestly, my personal experience is that lies most of the time overwrite reality. And it's not simply about, our attitude towards journalism. And in that respect, to put it very briefly and in a provocative way, in many respects, the biggest threat to journalistic standards and the freedom of the press is journals and journalism itself.
Oh, okay. We'll talk about that. But I read just over the weekend there were hundreds of people demonstrating in Budapest after a journalist said that he was beaten up by a government official. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, that's a lie.
It is?
Yes. No government, because no government official was involved. There was no incident, basically. So the story is fake.
So hundreds of journalists just demonstrated with no reason?
Again, I mean, Mr. Bernstein's insight to what and how journalism should work is really meaningful for me, because his suggestion was that to come to the spot, take the time to familiarize what is happening in Hungary, and please don't rely on those news bits of information that are coming from one particular region. Jump on it. I can tell you lots of stories, actually, including in 2015, CNN's behavior at the peak of the migration crisis in Hungary, right in the midst of Budapest. So I've long and nice stories about how jumping on news, jumping on the particular event without knowing the context, without being familiar with the rules, has basically resulted in lies, fake news, and the distortion of reality in a way which did lots of harm, actually, to my country and lots of harm to journalistic standards.
Galina, I'd like to go back to this whisper you were talking about. Now, with social media, you can shout out loud. What's happening in the realm of social media in Russia?
Well, I told you that it's not so easy now, even in the internet, in the social media, because a couple of years ago, internet in Russia was probably one of, as our experts say, experts of independent experts, they recognized a couple of years ago that internet in Russia was one of the most really free from any control. But in recent couple of years, our government understood that social networks and internet is a very powerful means of reaching the audience and on controlling the minds. So they are trying to kind of
what they monitor, what's happening?
Yes, they are monitored. Well, I can tell you a short story of myself and my colleagues. We are doing as our foundation, our community of investigative journalists. We are one of the things we are doing. We are an NGO, a journalistic NGO, to be clear. So one of the things we are doing is teaching or organizing trainings of investigative journalism for reporters in the Russian regions. This activity was proclaimed anti-government, and we were proclaimed foreign agents because they say, according to the new laws, again, passed through the parliament, such activity is called political activity. Since we get grants from international organizations for these trainings, we are proclaimed foreign agents. So what they do after proclaiming us, they announce through their guys in the social media that we are traitors, we are all this stuff. They start harassment and bullying us in the social media. When we come to some town or to some region where we are planning to organize a training, they start putting these bad stories in the media so that the people would not come and the students would not participate in these trainings, in these seminars, would not meet us. And last probably the latest means they are using against us is local hooligans who are, throwing this green stuff. It's very modern now in Russia. How they meet traitors and opposition politicians or civil activists or critical journalists. Last time I experienced this myself. When I came to Yoshkar-Ola, it's one of the Russian, Mariel Russian region, they met me with a whole jug of this green stuff and just poured on me. It was not very pleasant, of course, but still we did have our training. But at night, these guys arrived to the place where I was staying, and they broke the windows. They throw a dead rat through the window, and all this small green stuff, just to mention that here we are, that we knew that who they were. No reaction on the no reaction from the police. Although, of course, we went to the police station and described the situation and put official player, to the police. But myself and my colleagues, we started investigating what these people are doing and who they are. And our the result of this investigation is that we are sure that these people are, that we are, surveyed by our police, but our secret police, the FSB, which is just calling the local people there, or local police, secret police departments in these towns, and they send these hooligans, or at least, they just wanted to that it would seem as if it was just a hooligan act, not just political, not connected with our professional activity, but just hooligans who are, some thugs or who are just, making some disturbance in the
on
streets.
their own, some independent
But
hooligans.
they are, yeah. But it's so because these people, they don't know us. We are strangers for them. So it's absolutely clear that they are getting some kind of instructions, whom to attack, when to attack, etc. Sometimes these people even don't know the name of our organization. It's so funny. They come and ask, "Are you, so and so?" We say no.
So who's behind it? How up is this going?
Well, it goes from Moscow, of course. It goes from the center. I mean, the central office of the FSB, of the Russian secret police, is of course in the know of what is going on. And what else they are doing? They are now searching the social networks for these people who are, for these activists. They are, as we know, absolutely, we really know that what they are doing. There are special departments in the secret police with the IT specialists who are monitoring the social networks, monitoring the certain words in the social networks. And after that, they can just search for the people who are writing some critical blogs or critical stories. So it's how they act at the moment.
We're talking Russia 2017, yeah?
Yes.
Quite
I wonder
amazing.
what we will be talking Russia 2018, and it's frightening.
Frankly, it seems so. Lynn, since we started, I think the President of the United States has tweeted at least 3 or 4 times.
Just a couple.
Yeah. Has he marginalized mainstream media completely?
So I think, and I forget who gave the figure, someone gave the figure earlier from last year that the trust in American media, it's at an all-time low. Now, that same survey, when it looked at local news organizations, it gets a little bit higher, but we are ranked now lower than car salesmen when it comes to who
Welcome
people
to the
trust.
club. We are the same here in Israel.
And so it definitely, I think, it's not a new trend. This is something that has been happening over time. We have seen it kind of lower, but this is the lowest it's been. And I do think, unfortunately, that the tweets and the attitude that Donald Trump has taken against the media, he has said he's at war with the media, that the media is the enemy of the American people. I do think that's hurting us and in helping that go lower. I think one way that we can, why it's concerning to me is that, at the end of the day, if the media is no longer trusted, where is the public going to get their information? Do they really want to rely on tweets from Donald Trump?
Do they care? I don't know.
Well, and so that's actually a great question. And that's something that SPJ is working toward to kind of, because I do think a lot of it is maybe lack of information, a lack of knowledge, that they've forgotten that as a citizen in the U.S., you have a right to this information. It's not journalists that have rights to this information. It's the citizens. You as a citizen have these rights. But they're off working these other jobs. They're nurses, they're doctors, they're teachers. They don't have time to fight for it because it's not easy to get, unfortunately. So it's journalists. That's our job to push for it. And I think we do need to make sure the public understands and it's clear that if we're blocked out, if journalists aren't allowed access, then the public doesn't have that access.
Yeah.
A little supplement to what Lynn said. I call it tricky Twitter because what I think we as journalists have to somehow to explain, find some way to explain to the public that these guys like Donald Trump, who tweets and has, as he says, this is the direct approach, direct connection with the public. But public gets, and we should somehow explain this, that it's his opinion that public gets, not just the real news, and not just the kind of objective or try to give objective news of what really happened. But it's just the opinion of a politician. And unfortunately, I think public takes it as, as this, they really play on this direct approach.
Yeah. Aviv, it used to, you alluded to this before, it used to be that a smart politician knew how to work with the media, how to sort of dance with the media. Now it looks like a smart politician knows how to fight with the media. That's what is needed to get elected. Is that true?
Of course. First of all, referring to what Lynn and Galina said, I think that you can't educate the people. You lost the battle. You can't tell the mass public how to listen or how to read news. And you know why I'm saying it? Because my friends, former colleagues in the media, when I asked them, "Oh, did you see in Ynet or in the website what they wrote?" They tell me, "Nah, I get all the information on Twitter." You're not on Twitter, so this is the way the people in the media, this is the way they follow the news. They don't necessarily sit at 8 o'clock waiting for the primetime news. They don't wake up at 7 a.m. watching the news because, frankly, there's not much to see in the morning because it's all, social stuff, fluffy, exactly. So I don't think that this is the way you'll be able to re-educate the people how to absorb or how to get their knowledge. I tend to agree with what you said, and there was a piece of art that I saw last week, a documentary about David Bitan, the leader of the coalition, a Knesset member, and whenever they attack the media, they show that they are standing for their rights, that they are protecting the people. And when in the US and also in Israel, when you publish day after day polls saying that Netanyahu will lose the elections, saying that Trump, and no way he'll win the elections, I don't blame the media for that, but this is the outcome. the people say, hey, look, maybe these guys are either manipulators or a bunch of liars. So when you attack them, what can you do? It serves.
Yeah, sure.
If that's the case, how can you explain Israel Today, Israel Hayom, a newspaper brought up by a staunch supporter of the Prime Minister, millions of dollars invested in a printed newspaper? Of course, there's a website as well. Is it a press? Is it government? Is it press? What is it according to you with your DNA as a journalist?
Okay, the question was from Chaim Shibi, who used to be a reporter for the other newspaper, but same question? Yeah.
We see that politicians and to be more the prime ministers are trying to close deal over the heads of the journalists with the owners of the media outlets, as we saw recently with Yediot Ahronot, and so to speak, to steer the ship in another direction, as was recorded. This is related to the Chaim Shibi's question.
Okay, take it, Aviv.
Okay. First of all, I can't stand this phenomena of Israel Hayom, that newspaper that has such an agenda. As I mentioned, I grew up in a house that
As opposed to which paper that doesn't have an agenda?
No, a personal agenda, and also that it hides. The difference is that it hides its agenda. If you take Haaretz, for instance, everybody knows what Axel Springer or whatever, what its agenda is. But when you delude the people, when you mislead the people, but saying we don't have any agenda, it's all fair, I don't like it. And I still preach for, there are all kinds of bylaws in journalism, and I think that these bylaws were breached. Referring to what you ask about all kinds of deals that politicians are trying to strike with the publishers or whatever, I must tell you that it is a common thing, and it always happened. And I remember when Netanyahu used to call the chairman of the IBA News, yelling at him that he doesn't deliver. And other politicians try to do it.
Well, that's an employee. It's not a publisher.
No. And you know what? There are always, there are many journalists here. There's always, as I define it, coalition and opposition. There are some politicians that are close to one journalist. The others are closer to the other journalist. And this is how it works. I'm not shocked by this thing. I don't think that this is something shocking or new, or it's something that will change the spectrum of journalism. I don't like the fact that there's a newspaper that hides its idea, but on one hand, but on the other hand, preaches for something. And I don't like journalists that say, as the new editor once, a new editor of Israel Hayom came to me and he say, why are you so adamant to Israel Hayom? We're doing an amazing job. But when I met Shlomo Cezana, another journalist in Israel Hayom, long time ago, by the way, it was in a funeral when Netanyahu's father passed away, and I came to the funeral and I saw him, Cezana, and I said, you in line with the devil, referring that he went from Ma'ariv newspaper to Israel Hayom. And I have nothing against Netanyahu, nothing against this thing, but I can't stand the fact that they breached the ethic code of journalism. And he said, we have to make our living. And then suddenly, when he was about to go as a traveling press with the prime minister to the US, and the prime minister was not happy with the way he covered Netanyahu, suddenly he was extracted. He said no. And who gave the order? You can assume. These things I don't like. Pardon me? You can guess.
Okay.
You can guess.
Okay, we went a little local here, but as Henry Kissinger said, all politics is local, and I say all journalism is local. But Zoltan, I'm going to go back to you. I think bottom line, you're winning. Is that true?
I myself, I'm not sure. I mean, you
Not
have a tough
personally,
job
yeah.
here,
You,
Jacob,
you and
because
your
you're trying
job,
to keep the conversation on track. But look, we face. I'm not going to talk about politics and politicians because if it's about esteem or appreciation, we are below journalists, I presume. But let's talk about. Yeah, probably yes. That's probably true. But let me put it in a way. Actually, our appreciation of journalism and journals or the press in general, and apart from the technological issues we face here, and that is, journalism is compromising or being compromised by the push for up to the minute, up to the second news. The urge to be there all the time and respond and be the first, and that goes against quality or journalism standards. In that respect, social media is a challenge that we don't really appreciate it yet. For myself,
Let me ask you this though: for governments like the one you're representing and working for, social media is friends or foe?
it's very difficult to say because the efficiency of using social media depends a lot actually on your political position or if you are in government or in opposition, and still there's a lot to do actually to map actually how there are possibilities to cope with, deal with, use social media for that purpose. It's not easy. I don't have a yes and no answer on that because it's a lot more complicated. What I wanted to come back to is that the technological issue, if you like, and the compromises that are coming with that for journalism is just one side. From our perspective, another element actually which is penetrating for the past couple of years, especially in the Central Europe, in the heart of Europe, in many respects actually in the entire European Union, that we, in many respects, journalism has surpassed the Rubicon. And that is, they're not reporting on politics, they're not trying to tell the people actually how they should formulate their opinion about politics and finally decide. But the press increasingly is trying to make politics. And I think that's a concern we shall deal with, because if that's the case, and again, in the case of Hungary, and we don't have the time to go deeper, we see that the so-called oppositional press, whatever it means, is basically becoming the primary political actor.
Exactly
And
the
that's the
same
real
lines you hear in Israel these days. It's quite interesting. More questions? Yeah.
You forgot one thing here, and that is skewed. I'm sorry, you forgot one thing here, and that's skewed news. They're lies, they're untruths, skewed news. When you look at the world press and how they present Israel, I think very often there is skewed news. 2 Palestinians were killed today. Da, 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 da. Sixth sentence. After they stabbed somebody, blah, 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 blah. It's skewed, totally skewed.
All right, let's ask a question in principle about views and news and facts. Obviously, it's a daily question in newsrooms how to draw the line. Do we do a good job at this?
So I would say I don't think that we're doing the best job that we can. And specifically in the U.S., this is absolutely an issue where, I would disagree that social media is a problem, because I think it's absolutely a great tool and it can have so much power. The key, though, is that you have to use it properly and treat it just as if it were the written word that's delivered on that doorstep. So the same ethics apply, the same values apply, the same responsibility applies. And I know that we are not always doing that. And then one tweet can then skew the whole understanding of the article. Even if you publish an article that maybe has that one sentence in that tweet as the 5th sentence, because you've learned more information, it's still out there, and maybe that's what's gained traction with everyone around the world. And that can become a problem. I mean, the example is the bust of Martin Luther King when President Donald Trump was elected, and going through the transition, a reporter tweeted and said it's been removed. It had not been removed. The reporter, I think, did an incredible job of apologizing profusely, trying to make sure that the truth was out there, that no, it was not removed, it was just moved for a moment. But that tweet caused a lot of damage, not only to him but also just to everything that was going on this time when it was charged, emotionally charged in the U.S.
Okay. Who has the microphone? Okay. Oh, all right. So please give it to someone who.
Thank you. My name is Daniel Blumenthal. I am a foreign correspondent here for the last 37 years. In Spanish, for Europe, for Spain, for the United States. And I think we are talking about governments and press, and I want to talk about one of the principal arms of the government, that is police. Police or uniformed officials in general. And the arrestment of journalists, mainly graphic journalists who hold cameras, video cameras, nobody talk about that here, and this is a boiling point, I think, between governments and
well, I think Galina just spoke about it.
Yes,
in
she was the only one because she's suffering that. But here in Israel, for example, we have police, the border police and the army, and also the Palestinian police and the Hamas police in Gaza, and everybody is arresting journalists. I want to ask the forum if there is some bright idea about how to connect or to diffuse this principle.
I wish we had an advice for this. I don't think we have any clear advice on how to do that. But if anybody wants to say anything while we move the microphone to the next question, you're welcome to. I don't think this is anything. And plus, remember, these are not journalists here who cover day-to-day events on borders and stuff like that. Especially not here in the Middle East. Yeah, I know. No, next time you'll sit here and you'll tell us your story, I'm sure.
The one thing I would add to that is there are, specifically in the United States, journalism organizations that are trying to document and keep track of all these instances. So I can absolutely give you a link to that. And we want to document, because the key is documenting. Because if you go specifically in the U.S. to Congress and say, we want you to look at this, we want you to investigate, the first thing they say is, give us examples. So that's what we're doing right now, is we're trying to create a database so we can show how big of an issue this is all around the world, specifically also in the U.S. And the more we draw attention to that, the hope is then that can we get action by bringing it to lawmakers, and can we also then bring it to the public, and will there be an uproar? I don't know, but maybe there will be,
I think
and
it's
maybe
good
they'll
advice.
march.
Thanks, Lynn.
Next
question, yeah.
I have the mic. Alan Abbey from the Shalom Hartman Institute, just down the street here. Maybe a very short answer to the long and complicated question would be to educate the police about the importance for a free press.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, okay, well, that's a separate conversation. But I wanted to ask Yaakov, and maybe even Ilana Dan, who's here, I know she's not on the panel, but do you individually, personally, professionally, today here in Israel, feel a chill in the air from government pushback, not quite as bad as Russia, and maybe as they're starting to feel the United States, but there's been a lot of talk about that. My question is in fact there, for working journalists, and I used to be a working journalist in Israel, but so not today, is there now a feel in the air of, because of threats of libel and government actions, that the freedom of the press, your professional operations on a daily basis, are threatened, and you feel a chill in the way you go to work every day?
A chill is a very delicate word, and I'm sure Ilana will. You have the mic. Go ahead, Ilana.
I think Yaakov can attest to that. Chill is a fine word. I think what we feel, on the one hand, is an attempt by government not only to suppress and inhibit, but also, as Aviv was saying, to use us as a bouncing bag, because we are an electoral asset. When we do an investigative piece, it's not a liability anymore. It's an asset, because they can use us as a rival. That's one thing. On the other hand, take Yaakov as an example. He did not move to Walla, not until something has basically changed there, because there was an attempt by the owner of Walla to use this website as an instrument, given his proximity to the Prime Minister. The way the journalists, the professional journalists in Walla reacted, the way journalism in Israel in general reacted, I believe, although I don't know the whole story, I believe it changed something. What I do know is that Walla looks different nowadays than it looked a year ago. So yes, you have the chill, yes, you have the attempts, yes, you have the bad winds blowing. But on the other hand, you have an assertive, aggressive, provocative, curious press. And I think the bottom line is that the public in Israel cannot afford anything less. And since most of us, there's this proximity between our private life and our public life, we cannot afford an inert and a suppressed press. And that's something that gives us the energy to keep on going. At the end of the day, it depends on the public. The day before the end of the day, it depends on us.
Well, thank you, Ilana. That was the nicest compliment and the best compliment I got in a long time, and from someone I consider the #1 journalist in Israel. Thank you very much, Ilana. I'll just add, yes, for Ilana. Sure. There's a war on the media here, same as in the United States. There's no doubt about that. And as Ilana said, it works fine for the politicians. It works really well. And sure, we feel this every second, every day, every minute. Should this affect our job? Not at all. Yes.
Joe Charloff, is this working? Yeah. Joe Charloff, independent, based in Israel. My question is mainly for either you or Aviv. As you both know, Haaretz is an outspoken newspaper, not exactly liked by the government. They ran an article a few days ago, and the headline was, "Is Israel becoming a fascist state?" My question is, do you see a scenario in which the government starts to instill fear in the editorship of these papers, which would result in them suppressing their tendency to publish articles like this, or think twice or three times?
If I may answer, I don't think so. I don't think that, despite the fact that the government tries to lift its arm or try to even harasses some of the journalists when they are criticizing the government, I don't think that at the end of the day the journalist will keep silence. You can see all the recent stories that were broken via the media. If it's a submarine story, if it's all the different investigations that are ongoing nowadays, and many other things. I think that at the end of the day, the media is doing its job, and there's no way you can shut it down or change the mood or the tune. I saw this headline in Haaretz, and I have two comments. One, as an Israeli, I feel very bad that overseas many people read Haaretz because it has its English version, and they think that this is the mirror, or this is what reflects, or this is what people, the information that they get. And I even know from my father that in recent times, the editors read Haaretz, and then they call the journalists that are stationed here and ask them what's going on, so they get the news ahead of the reporters here, and then it is all distorted. But I was even more concerned that I think it was this morning or yesterday, this morning, I read an article in Haaretz, or a column, saying that what was done to Barghouti, showing him breaching his hunger strike, eating candy, it was a stupid thing, and they really criticized the government, criticized the Minister of Police here for revealing this thing. And this is something that I feel bad. I think it's wrong, and it's stupid. But what can you do? This is Haaretz. Will Haaretz, or on the other hand, the government will be able to stop all the attempts in revealing the stories behind the scenes? No. And one more thing, I must tell you that my personal enthusiasm to cross the lines between being a journalist and then becoming the media advisor for the one who I covered before, I wanted to be the bug in the room. I was very curious to know what is really going on there. If what I'm saying when I'm sitting outside is right or wrong. And I must tell you, frankly, that the media gets most of the information, or even 99% of the information. So
Things are good.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. You can attack him. We're almost finished. I appreciate if you have a question for the other members of the panel that has nothing to do with Israel or something that they can relate to. Can you? Yeah. Oh yeah?
Yeah. I have the microphone.
According to this guideline? Yeah.
Okay.
A question.
Yes. We've been talking a lot about the impact of government on journalism, government and law enforcement on journalism. So I'd like you to address the dynamic in the other direction. What are your thoughts about the impact of journalism on events that happen? For example, we know in many countries when the cameras show up, the demonstration begins or the riot begins because that's what it's for. It's for the cameras. We know that, of course, journalism is not CCTV that takes everything. Right. It focuses on one thing, puts a spotlight on one thing and not on the other.
Right.
So I'd like you to address
even
that.
Carl Bernstein spoke about manufactured conflicts. Give her the mic, Galina.
So, not exactly about journalism, but some optimistic thing about the social networks. I just remembered that I should share this information. I think it's interesting to share it with you. As you know, investigative journalists do have really tough life in Russia, but we've tried to find new ways of doing our doing our work. For instance, there is a foundation of fighting corruption with a young opposition politician, Mr. Navalny. So what these people are doing, some of them are journalists, some of them are lawyers. They could not publish investigation that they prepared on the Russian Prime Minister, Mr. Medvedev. But they did publish this investigation in the social networks. And finally, the audience was, as they say now, it's about 15 million people who really watched this investigation. It was very professionally done. It had videos, documents, everything presented in this multimedia style, and was fantastic film. And so after the film appeared, we had the first in a couple of years the first political manifestation that not very big, but still there were about 10,000 people in Moscow without authorization who went into the streets with their slogans which were against the Prime Minister and calling that the Prime Minister should go away, should quit his position because he is a thief. Because all this investigation was about the conflict of interests, about the millions, about his houses which were bought, nobody knows for what money, etc., etc., etc. And even in the regional towns of Russia, which are quite like we say, it's a kind of swan. Nothing happens there. I mean, nothing activities like this happens there. But after this film appeared, the people really went out in the streets and started asking questions. So I think that is an example that even in such a swan like Russia today, people, you really can do something with the public opinion, trying to use this or that means to, somehow to make people think about what is happening.
All right. And to the question, Lynn, briefly before we finish, about manufacturing conflicts, about ratings, about clicks, about trying to create whatever brings audience in this very difficult era of business models for the media. Here. For Lynn. That was the for Lynn.
Sorry. Well, I think, unfortunately, it definitely is happening. I mean, if I said it wasn't, that would be a lie. It's something that, so I lead at the NBC station in San Diego, I lead an investigative unit. And one of the things that we do look at is, will our viewers, will our audience be interested? it's a TV station, but I am a web native, so I look at web, I look at the analytics, just because that tells you way more than our rating systems do, I think.
That's depressing, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Oh, it is.
But I can track what are people interested in, what are they not interested in. And there are some times where there are stories that I say, you know what, we're not going to cover this because last time we covered something like this, people weren't interested in it. Now, those stories, though, don't reach the high bar of, okay, this is breaking, this is interesting, this is absolutely important. There are also many more times that we cover stories that only end up online, and my other managers that manage more of the TV content on a daily basis say people aren't going to care about that. That's a terrible TV story. Then all of a sudden, 2 days later, our web manager comes and says, that's doing the best on the web. Then they want a TV story.
Then you're a king.
Yes.
Suddenly you're a king.
So I do think absolutely it's happening. I think we have to be very, very careful of it. But I think if you stick to covering just good journalistic stories, if it's an important story that the public should know about it, if you cover it in the right way, they will still pay attention.
Yeah, I would applaud for that. You want to finish with this?
I would like to come back to the question on how media's reporting or activity has an impact on governance, or in general the appreciation of, say, a given government. I'm going to tell you a particular one example, which you probably are familiar with, and it kind of going to resonate here in Israel. Back at the peak of the migration crisis in 2015, the authorities were trying to cut order in the midst of chaos. And there was this famous picture coming out from a small city close to Budapest, where allegedly Hungarian police was throwing a refugee family, quotation mark, on the rail, allegedly showing the police brutality of Hungarians. That was a picture sent out by a photographer on the ground, not being checked out by any of the editorial boards, going around the globe. By the time we were able to catch it, it was distributed 800,000 basically on Twitter and so on. In reality, and we have the footage, the guy had nothing to do with the lady and the kid. They were not a family. Police were trying to help them up from the rails, to which the guy was throwing the kid and the woman. And here we go, that symbolic picture was going around the globe, trying to depicting the Hungarian government's behavior. And again, against that, there are no words. Hundreds, thousands, million words are not going to work. So that's what I'm calling out: technological responsibility, the responsibility of the journalist on the ground, the editorial board back wherever they are, to check out the facts. So don't lie, because that was a net lie coming, in a moment which was very delicate in the course of events.
And that's a reality we live in. Thank you very much, participants. Thank you very much for joining us.
I want to thank the panelists for excellent job. Yaakov, thank you very much. When I was the director of the government press office, the King of Spain came to visit with all the journalists. I invited the journalists for dinner at 8. They arrived at 10. So now we took the middle time, and you're all invited to dinner, those of you who have vouchers. Thank you very much, guys. And there's another day tomorrow.